and hung up. She never heard from him again. He later explained it. I just wanted to prove to myself that I could have married her. But Brooks concluded in retrospect that he had deliberately planned the entire courtship and rejected the advance as vengeance for the breakup she initiated in 1968. By then, Bundy had begun skipping classes at law school. By April, he had stopped attending entirely as young women began to disappear in the Pacific Northwest. There is the first two series of murders, Washington, Oregon. There is no consensus on when or where Bundy began killing women. He told different stories to different people and refused to divulge the specifics of his earliest crimes, even as he confessed in graphic detail to dozens of later murders. In the days preceding his execution, he told Nelson that he attempted his first kidnapping in 1969 in Ocean City, New Jersey, but did not kill anyone until sometime in 1971 in Seattle. He told psychologist Art Norman that he killed two women in Atlantic City in 1969 while visiting family in Philadelphia. He hinted but refused to elaborate to homicide detective Robert D. Kemble that he committed a murder in Seattle in 1972 and another murder in 1973 that involved a hitchhiker near Tumwater. Rule and Kemble both believed that he might have started killing as a teenager. Circumstantial evidence suggested that he may have abducted and killed 8-year-old Anne-Marie Burr of Tacoma when he was 14 years old in 1961, an allegation that he repeatedly denied. His earliest documented homicides were committed in 1974 when he was 27 years old. By then, by his own admission, he had mastered the necessary skills in their era before DNA profiling to leave minimal incriminating forensic evidence at crime scenes. Shortly after midnight on January 4th, 1974, around the time that he terminated his relationship with Brooks, Bundy entered the basement apartment of 18-year-old Karen Sparks, identified as Joni Lenz, Mary Adams, and Terry Caldwell by various sources, a dancer and a student at UW. After bludgeoning Sparks' lenses with a metal rod from her bed frame, he sexually assaulted her with either the same rod or a metal speculum, causing extensive internal injuries. She remained unconscious for 10 days, but survived with permanent physical and mental disabilities. In early morning hours of Friday the 1st, Bundy broke into the basement room of Linda Ann Healy, a UW graduate who broadcast morning radio weather reports for skiers. He beat her unconscious, dressed her in blue jeans, a white blouse, and boots, and carried her away. During the first half of 1974, female college students disappeared at the rate of about one per month. On March 12th, Donna Gail Madsen, a 19-year-old student at the Evergreen State College in Olympia, 60 miles, 95 kilometers southwest of Seattle, left her dormitory to attend a jazz concert on campus but never arrived. On April 17th, Susan Elaine Rancourt disappeared. While on her way to her dorm after an evening advisor's meeting at Central Washington State College in Ellensburg, 110 miles, 175 kilometers southeast of Seattle. Two female Central Washington students later came forward to report encounters. One on the night of Rancourt's disappearance. The other 3 nights earlier, with a man wearing an arm sling, asking for help carrying a load of books to his brown or tan Volkswagen Beetle. On May 6th, Roberta Kathleen Parks left her dormitory at Oregon State University in Corvallis, 260 miles, 420 kilometers south of Seattle, to have coffee with friends at Memorial Union, but never arrived. Detectives from the King County and Seattle Police Departments grew increasingly concerned. There was no significant physical evidence, and the missing women had little in common, apart from being young, attractive white college students with long hair parted in the middle. On June 1st, Brenda Carol Ball, 22, disappeared after leaving the Flame Tavern in Burien near Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. She was last seen in the parking lot talking to a brown-haired man with his arm in a sling. In the early hours of June 11th, UW student Georgianne Hawkins vanished while walking down a brightly lit alley between her boyfriend's dormitory residence and her sorority house. The next morning, 3 Seattle homicide detectives and a criminalist combed the entire alleyway on their hands and knees, finding nothing. Bundy later told Keppel that he lured Hawkins to his car and knocked her unconscious with a crowbar. After handcuffing her, he drove her to Issaquah, a suburb 20 miles, 30 kilometers east of Seattle, where he strangled her and spent the night with her body. He told Keppel that he returned to the UW alley the next morning after, and in the very midst of a major crime scene investigation, located and gathered Hawkins' earrings and one of her shoes, where he had left them in the adjoining parking lot, and departed unobserved. It was a feat so brazen, wrote Campbell, that it astonishes police every day. He said he revisited Hawkins' corpse on 3 occasions. After Hawkins' disappearance was publicized, witnesses came forward to report seeing a man that night in an alley behind a nearby dormitory. He was on crutches with a leg cast and was struggling to carry a briefcase. One woman recalled that the man asked her to help him carry the case to his car, a light brown Volkswagen Beetle. During this period, Bundy was working in Olympia as the assistant director of the Seattle Crime Prevention Advisory Commission, where he wrote a pamphlet for women on rape prevention. Later, he worked at the Department of Emergency Services, DES. Excuse me, I got to unwrap this candy. A state government agency involved in the search for the missing women. The DES mandated Carol Ann Boone, a twice divorced mother who, 6 years later, would play an important role in the final phase of his life. Reports of the 6 missing women and Sparks' brutal beating appeared prominently in newspapers and on television throughout Washington and Oregon. Fear spread among the population hitchhiking by young women dropped sharply. Pressure mounted on the law enforcement agencies, but the scarcity of physical evidence. Where am I? But the scarcity of physical evidence severely hampered them. Police could not provide reporters with the little information that was available, or fear of compromising the investigation. Further similarities between the victims were noted. The disappearances all took place at night, usually near ongoing construction work, within a week of midterm or final exams. All of the victims were wearing slacks or blue jeans, and at most crime scenes, there were sightings of a man wearing a cast or a sling driving a brown or tan Volkswagen Beetle. The Pacific Northwest murders culminated on July 14th with the broad daylight abductions of 2 women from a crowded beach at Lake Sammamish State Park in Nassau. 5 female witnesses described an attractive young man wearing a white tennis outfit with his left arm in a sling, speaking with a slight accent, perhaps Canadian or British. Introducing himself as Ted, he asked their help in unloading a sailboat of his tan or bronze-colored Volkswagen Beetle. 4 refused. One accompanied him as far as his car, saw that there was no sailboat, and fled. 3 additional witnesses saw him approach Janice Ann Ott, 23, a probation caseworker at the King County Juvenile Court, with the sailboat story, and watched her leave the beach in his company. About 4 hours later, Denise Murray in Asland, a 19-year-old woman who was studying to become a computer programmer, left a picnic to go to the restroom and never returned. Bundy told both Stephen Machado and William Hagmeyer that Ott was still alive when he returned with Nasland, and that he forced one to watch him as he murdered the other, but later denied it in an interview with Lewis on the eve of his execution. King County Police, finally armed with a detailed description of their suspect and his car, posted flyers throughout the Seattle area. A composite sketch was printed in regional newspapers and broadcast on local television stations. Elizabeth Klopfer, Ann Rule, a desk employee, and the UW psychology professor all recognized the profile, the sketch, and the car, and reported Bundy as a possible suspect. But detectives, who were receiving out to 200 tips per day, thought it unlikely that a clean-cut law student with no adult criminal record could be the perpetrator. On September 6th, 2 grouse hunters stumbled across the skeletal remains of Ott and Nasland near a service road in Issaquah, 2 miles 3 kilometers east of Lake Sammamish State Park. An extra femur and several vertebrae found at the site were later identified by Bundy as those of Georgia and Hawkins. 6 months later, forestry students from Green River Community College discovered the skulls and mandibles of Healy, Rancourt, Parks, and Ball on Taylor Mountain, where Bundy frequently hiked, just east of Issaquah. Mason's remains were never recovered. Idaho, Utah, Colorado. In August 1974, Bundy received his second acceptance from the University of Utah Law School. They moved to Salt Lake City, leaving Club 4 in Seattle. While he called Club 4 often, he dated at least a dozen other women. As he studied the first year law curriculum the second time, he was devastated to find out that the other students had some intellectual capacity that he did not. He found the classes completely incomprehensible. It was a great disappointment to me, he said. A new string of homicides began the following month, including the two that would remain undiscovered until Bundy confessed to them shortly before his execution. On September 2nd, he raped and strangled a still unidentified hitchhiker in Idaho, then either disposed of the remains immediately in a nearby river or returned the next day to photograph and dismember the corpse. On October 2nd, he seized a 16-year-old Nancy Wilcox in Holiday, a suburb of Salt Lake City. Her remains were buried near Capitol Reef National Park, some 200 miles, 320 kilometers south of Holiday, but were never found. On October 18th, Melissa Ann Smith, the 17-year-old daughter of the police chief of Midvale, another Salt Lake City suburb, disappeared after leaving a pizza parlor. Her nude body was found in a nearby mountainous area 9 days later. Postmortem examination indicated that she may have remained alive for up to 7 days following her disappearance. On October 31st, Laura and Amy, also 17, disappeared 25 miles, 40 kilometers south of Leahy, after leaving a cafe just after midnight. Her naked body was found by hitchhikers 9 miles, 14 kilometers to the northeast in American Fork Canyon by Thanksgiving Day. I'm gonna open up another piece of candy here. One sec. Both women had been beaten, raped, sodomized, and strangled with nylon stockings. Years later, Bundy described his post-mortem rituals with the corpses of Smith and Amy, including hair shampooing and application of makeup. In the late afternoon of November 8th, Bundy approached an 18-year-old telephone operator, Carol Deborah, at Passion Place Mall in Murray, less than a mile from the Midvale restaurant where Melissa Smith was last seen. He identified himself as Officer Roseland of the Murray Police Department and told DeRanche that someone had attempted to break into her car. He asked her to accompany him to the station to file a complaint. When DeRanche pointed out to Bundy that he was driving on a road that did not lead to the police station, he immediately pulled onto the shoulder and attempted to handcuff her. During her struggle, he inadvertently fastened both handcuffs to the same wrist, and DeRanche was able to open the car door to escape. Later that evening, Deborah Jean Kent, a 17-year-old student at Viewmont High School in Bountiful, 20 miles, 30 kilometers north of Murray, disappeared after leaving a theater production at the school to pick up her brother. The school's drama teacher and a student told police that a stranger had asked them to come out to the parking lot to identify a car. Another student later saw the same man pacing in the rear of the auditorium, and the drama teacher spotted him again shortly before the end of the play. Outside the auditorium, investigators found a key that unlocked the handcuffs removed from Carol Durant's wrists. In November, Elizabeth Klopfer called King County Police a second time after reading that young women were disappearing in towns surrounding Salt Lake City. Detective Randy Shimmer of the Major Crimes Division interviewed her in detail. By then, Bundy had risen considerably on the King County hierarchy of suspicion, but the late Sammamish witness, considered most reliable by detectives, failed to identify him from a photo lineup. In December, Klopfer called the Salt Lake County Sheriff's Office and repeated her suspicions. Bundy's name was added to the list of suspects, but at that time no credible forensic evidence linked him to the Utah crimes. In January 1975, Bundy returned to Seattle after his final exams and spent a week with Klopfer, who did not tell him that she had reported him to police on 3 occasions. She made plans to visit him in Salt Lake City in August. In 1975, Bundy shifted much of his criminal activity eastward from his base in Utah to Colorado. On January 12th, a 23-year-old registered nurse named Karen Eileen Campbell disappeared while walking down a well-lit hallway between the elevator and her room at the Wildwood Inn, now the Wildwood Lodge, in Snowmass Village, 400 miles, 640 kilometers southeast of Salt Lake City. Her nude body was found a month later next to a dirt road just outside the resort. She had been killed by blows to her head from a blunt instrument that left distinctive linear grooves, depressions on her skull. Her body also bore deep cuts from a sharp weapon. On March 15th, 100 miles, 160 kilometers northeast of Snowmass, Vail ski instructor Julie Cunningham, 26, disappeared while walking from her apartment to a dinner date with a friend. Bundy also told Colorado investigators that he approached Cunningham on crutches and asked him to help carry his ski boots to his car, when he clubbed and handcuffed her and assaulted and strangled her at a secondary site near Rifle, 90 miles, 140 kilometers west of Vail. Weeks later, he made the 6-hour drive from Salt Lake City to revisit her remains. Dennis Lynn Oliverson, 25, disappeared near Utah-Colorado border in Grand Junction on April 6 while riding her bicycle to her parents' house. Her bike and sandals were found under a viaduct near the railroad bridge. On May 6, Bundy lured 12-year-old Lynette Dawn Culver from Alameda Junior High School in Pocatello, Idaho, 160 miles, 255 kilometers north of Salt Lake City. He drowned and then sexually assaulted her in his hotel room before disposing of her body in a river, possibly the Snake, north of Pocatello. In May, 3 of Bundy's Washington State DES workers City and stayed for a week in his apartment. Bundy subsequently spent a week in Seattle with Klopfer in early June, and they discussed getting married following Christmas. Again, Klopfer made no mention of our multiple discussions with King County Police and Salt Lake County Sheriff's Office. Bundy disclosed neither his ongoing relationship with Boom nor a non-current romance with a Utah known student. In various accounts as Kim Andrews or Sharon Hour. On June 28th, Susan Curtis vanished from the campus of Brigham Young University in Bravo, 45 miles, 70 kilometers south of Salt Lake City. Curtis's murder became Bundy's last confession, tape recorded moments before he entered the execution chamber. The bodies of Wilcox, Kent, Cunningham, Oliverson, Culver, and Curtis were never recovered. In August or September 1975, Bundy was baptized into the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, although he was not an active participant in services and ignored most church restrictions. He would later be excommunicated by the LDS Church following his 1976 kidnapping conviction. When asked his religious preference after his arrest, Bundy answered Methodist, the religion of his childhood. In Washington state, investigators were still struggling to analyze the Pacific Northwest murder spree that had ended as abruptly as it had begun. In an effort to make a sense of an overwhelming mass of data, they resorted to the then innovative strategy of compiling a database. They used the King County payroll computer, a huge primitive machine by contemporary standards, but the only one available for their use. After inputting the many lists they had compiled, classmates and acquaintances of each victim, Volkswagen owners named Ted, known sex offenders, and so on, they queried the computer for coincidences. Out of thousands of names, 26 turned up on 4 lists. One was Ted Bundy. Detectives also manually compiled a list of their 100 best suspects, and Bundy was on that list as well. He was literally at the top of the pile of suspects when word came from Utah of his arrest. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.